Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
How are you today?
I'm okay. I've been better.
Now, what could make your day better? When you say to others, "I've been better," or "I could be better," what could make today better for you?
Oh, well. Ah, boy, what could make my day better? That's an interesting one. I mean, if I count on myself alone, I suppose getting on with my work, like, writing, stuff like that, artwork. Um, but companions, I'm a person who likes companionship, so I would, that would make me a pretty happy person.
You mean that
Uh,
skeleton hanging behind you isn't company enough?
I know it's not. It's not. It won't wake up. It won't wake up. Um, so that, yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out. So that that stuff would make me, that stuff. I mean, I like our friendship. I mean, that makes me happy. Friends, stuff like that.
All right.
This podcast is based around the history and experiences of the infamous Shane Bugbee, recollected and retold by Shane Bugbee himself. Who is Shane? Well, you're about to find out. I'm your host, Nannerl, and this is Speak of the Devil.
Do you know what? You told me something interesting earlier, and it was I can control myself. I can control my boundaries. And when you said this quote, you were referring to a procedure that you've been going through therapy. That I believe that you called it EMDR. And we're just going to throw you into this right now
Wow,
and
heavy.
ask you, what is EMDR?
Well, that is something I've had to do before this show because I've been writing about my past. And so, I'm just all triggered out. Like it's heavy stuff. It's hard to deal with these really hard issues. And to write about them honestly is not an easy task. It's just not easy. Maybe it is for you or someone else, but not for me. And it's just to write about heartbreak and betray all this weird shit is just hard emotionally and for me, well, I'm not used to dealing with it in a calm way. And so you talk about EMDR, and it's like transcendental meditation, but with science attached to it. Like you close your eyes. I mean, you work like for it work. I went to my therapist and I go twice a week to my therapist and once a week to a psychiatrist right now. Um, you go for two, 3, 4, 5 weeks, and you talk about what you could talk about in this EMDR session.
Mm-hmm.
Basically what they do is they trigger you out while you're while you're sitting there. Like think about the word, like whatever triggers you out. You're supposed to bring yourself back to that moment. So if it's physical abuse or whatever, you shut your eyes and you think about it. And so you're holding these two paddles, which vibrate. They vibrate left and right, and then you hear a beep in your ear, left and right, left. So when it vibrates in your left hand, you'll hear a beep in the left ear, and when it vibrates in the right hand, you'll hear a beep in the right ear. And so this goes do 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 do, and it recreates REM sleep, I guess. And so while this is going on, you're sitting there, and you're sitting with your eyes closed, and it's going, and he's now my counselor, this is for a specific topic that I'm dealing with. This isn't for every topic. This is the mantra or whatever that he says while I'm holding these paddles and have my eyes shut and thinking about this awful fucking moment in my life. Like, fuck, I'm like, it's hard to even go because I'm on the bus and I'm already getting traumatized because I'm thinking about what I got to think about. So I get there. By the time I get there, I'm a wreck.
Uh-huh.
And so he's like, this is what he's saying. I can control myself. I can control my boundaries. Um, the marriage was hard and you'll get through it. Something like that. You know, that's what he says. He says it repeatedly, then he'll just stop. How do you feel? And
I don't mean to laugh.
No, please do laugh. What's your laugh about?
It seems like it's like one of those remarks, kind of like telling someone who's panicking to calm down. It seems like, why do you gotta say that?
It is irritating as fuck. But it's part of the process. He said, how do you feel? I go, I don't know. I feel like punching you in the head right now for interrupting my horrible thought. I don't say punch in the head because I'm saying that to be dramatic here, and I shouldn't because I don't say that. I said I feel irritated is what I say. This is irritating me. You're stopping me, and I have to explain to him like I think a little slower and methodical. I'm a slow, methodical thinker, and so you have to give me a little more time to grip that trauma. And so he did. We lengthened that moment, but he butts in there and he wants to know exactly how I feel. And how do you like from a scale from 1 to 10, do you believe in what's being said? And, I like one time I said, well, certainly I can believe in I can control myself when I'm murdering someone. I can control myself when I'm, like cutting someone's head off, maybe. How about that? So I can believe what you're saying, but it's just like it's a fucking bumper sticker statement. You can believe in yourself that you can fly off a building too. Doesn't mean you can. So philosophically, I have problems with some of these mantras. Like I can believe in myself, and I can control myself, and I can control my boundaries. And so, like he says, he goes, Shane, you get very deep and philosophical, and we have to have philosophical arguments often. Like he goes, well, you could control yourself murdering someone, but you also would be controlling your boundaries, and your boundaries are probably not to be locked up, all this stuff, like not to go to jail, not to end your life. So those are your personal boundaries. So you see, my therapist has a hard time with me. That's all I'm saying. And so that's what that is. And I have to say, like the first time I left, it was so trippy because it felt heady, like almost you're stoned, but not stoned. Nothing like being intoxicated, but heady. Like, man, they're fucking with my head. And I left, and he's like, you have to be grounded. So before I leave, he's, he throws a pillow at me, and I got to spray. I shoot water in my face, like, let's dip my hand in a glass and sort of fling it on my face to wake up, because you get traumatized, and he's like, you got to ground yourself. I can't let you walk out of here if you're not grounded. So we do all these breathing techniques and stuff like that, because you're triggered. You're like, I'm like hyper fucking triggered, like, pan, like I'm fucked up. I'm freaking out, like, because you're, it's just being pushed in your face. Like it's a Clockwork Orange shit, like your eyes are forced open and you have to see this shit. It's like, oh my God, no. So I leave, and he's like, what are you going to do to ground yourself? And I go, probably eat like 100 hot dogs. And he laughs and he goes, but your personal boundaries, you say you're looking to lose weight, so maybe you're just going to have one hot dog. But I didn't have any hot dogs. I just say that as a joke because I've been known to eat my feelings, and that's just how it goes. Everyone has their thing with feelings. It's alcoholics, drug addicts, whatever. Mine is, culinary delights.
I toggle between eating and shopping, and so I completely understand that feeling. On one end, you might feel like you're rewarding yourself in some aspects when you feel good, but when you don't feel so good, you feel like you need that pick-me-up.
Oh, God, it's like a flogging, though. You go have the hot dog, and then you're like, dumb, bad, yes. You got to be kind to yourself. That's where the phrase, be kind to yourself. Give yourself a break. People make mistakes. I like those kind of things about self-care, about depression or all this stuff. You have to think about, you're not the only one in the planet that's having this hard time. A lot of people have this hard time. And so it becomes, think about the universal aspect of pain versus just your pain. Mm-hmm. And so those things comfort me sometimes, and sometimes they don't, because like I said, I can get very philosophical on things, fuck the world and its pain. I'm in pain. Like, I don't give a fuck about anyone but the thorn in my foot. But I do agree with that statement that everyone's in pain and, you should think about that. It's just, it's not easy. This therapy's not easy. I like going to my psychiatrist. My therapist is a different story. I like him too. I like Steve, but Steven.
What makes Dr. Steven less of a pleasure to see than your psychiatrist?
Well, my psychiatrist is an artist. She's a grand wizard. She's a woman. I'd rather deal with women. I found all therapists and stuff that are women to be better. This is, they're just, I don't like the man thing, but it's just, but Steven knows that. She's older. Like Steven's younger than me. But she's older, so she's wise. So she's a studied psychiatrist. Her fucking office is stacked with books she's read. I mean, it's stacked. I mean, she knows everything. She studies this. She's studies the mind. And so she gives me Obi-Wan Kenobi advice. It's just yes, that, I go, am I wrong for thinking this? She goes, no, you're not wrong for thinking it, but you can't stay there. And I go, why can't I stay there? I want to think about it. She goes, you can't stay there. It's not productive. It's going to hurt you. It's right. It's okay to think that, but you can't stay there. And so she's telling me what I can and can't do, where Steven's like, well, how do you feel about that decision?
He's more of a Yoda, it sounds
yes.
like.
Yes. He practiced nonviolent communication. And I could say well, I started screaming on the bus, and he's like, well, how's that working out for you?
Oh my God.
Well, and I got to be Steven. Of course it's not working out. I'm yelling at people. I want to murder them. What kind of question is that? Well, how's it working out for me? Don't ask that question. So, but I love dude. He's cool, and he's brought me a long way in a lot of ways. But also he's reading out of a book. He's a very learned, he's a very smart person. He's college. He has more than me. But I can challenge him. The psychiatrist, I cannot. She's a master. It's fucking Bruce Lee action or something. Obi-Wan. It's holy fuck. She's amazing. And she usually doesn't see people but for 15, 20 minutes a day.
Because she's more focused on the drug prescription most of the time, right?
Right. But she finds me interesting and she likes me. And so she spends an hour and a half with me sometimes. We just go off. And sometimes she's like, we didn't even talk about your pills today. We just talked about whatever. We just go. We go philosophically, and I challenge her. We talk about love. And Shane, I've told you this. Love is crazy. It's a crazy part. Freud says it's insanity. Love is insanity. And I go, but love, so we argue about love. We don't really argue, but we go back and forth about love. And I say, well, love, could be this and could be that. I said, love, what if love is control, pride of control? And she goes, no, that's this other person's love. That's not love. And I go, how can you say it's not love if it's someone else's love? And she goes, because love is more caring for the stuff like this. It's care, not control. And I go, oh, this drunk guy, Juan, I met this guy, Juan, at a bus stop, and he was drunk, and he started talking to me about God. And I said, hey, forget about God. It is that. But she goes, it's also a mother's job. And I go, well, Juan was drunk at a bus stop. It's just a metaphor to him. I get, so, but anyway, there you go.
May I ask you, perhaps and I'm kind of playing devil's advocate, or I guess Steven's advocate.
Go for it.
I'm curious, maybe his approach of how does this make you feel? How does this make you feel? Is part of his method, because he's allowing you to personally explore what's going on, which is his job. Whereas the psychiatrist with the prescription, it is her job to make sure you know what you're going to run into with the method she gives you.
Yeah, I'm not putting Steven down. What he does is working. You're right. You're absolutely right about what you're saying. And I think it's when Steven does that, I had to come to terms with he's basically making me not making me, but I have to take responsibility for my actions. How is that working out for you when you're like, I haven't gotten up in days. I'm depressed. I'm not showering. How's that working out for you? Well, obviously I smell, Steven. You know, it's awful. No one wanted to sit next to me on the bus. Now, this has never happened. I'm exaggerating, but I mean, it's happened, but when I leave, I shower. But I've been pretty depressed at times. And so, you know, but he'll say something like that, and you basically walk away having to take responsibility for your shit. And that's fine. And a therapist, he calls me on my shit. Like if I say something, he knows all this stuff. He's like, well, that's not true. You've said this before. So he calls you on your shit. You know, it's like that. He doesn't let me get away with things. And that's cool. I like that. I like that about you. I like that about my friends. You know, that's what makes a friend to me, is honesty. And so, and you know, being able to call each other on their shit. Anything else is just an acquaintance.
Mm-hmm. I think that he also allows you to be exposed in a safe place to exploring, getting out of your comfort level, which is a good challenge for not only you, but brain growth, just healing physically from your trauma. I'm not learned in psychology, so I'm just speculating.
No, that's right. You know, here's the weird thing about Steven now. So when I'm forced out of my home, so I leave, I have to leave, you know, so, you know, the word I left my wife is not necessarily true. I was forced out of the situation.
Okay.
And so when I did that, a patron of mine stepped in and tried to be a middle person between us and help me out, get my stuff back. And a lot of that didn't work. But I guess my wife had suggested this therapist. Now, I didn't know it at the time. My patron said, here's a therapist. And I said, well, I want to interview the therapist first. I don't want to just go to one. I interview my people, and I need to make sure I'm comfortable with them. And she was like, she had a look, and I said, what's wrong with that? What's wrong with that? And she's like, nothing's wrong. And at some point, my wife rubs in that she picked the therapist, like through a harassing email. And I saw that as a challenge. I was like, yeah, I'll take that challenge. I'll go see Steven. Fuck it. You know, because it wasn't to help me. It was to irritate me based on the dynamic of this situation.
Kind of sully your experience by putting her foot in there.
Right, because there's these weird things that I don't want to. There's these weird nuances that are, I think, a little too personal on her, you know, like not on my side, but on her side. So let's just say the makeup of Steven fit part of my trauma, part of the stuff that was happening. And so that was another trigger. And when I told Steven about it, I go, you know, see, this is how it goes. This is what I know about this situation. This is why I had to leave. And, you know, she picked you. And he goes, oh. And I go, what do you think about that? And he goes, it's definitely weird. It's definitely, you know, he agreed. The psychiatrist is like, I don't know what I think about that right now, Shane. And I go, she goes, what do you think about it? And I go, fuck it. I'm up for the challenge. Let's do it. And my psychiatrist laughed. She's like, that's pretty good. You know, I'm not going to, you know, like, fuck that. You know, if he's, the only thing I care about is if a therapist is professional. Like when I interview a therapist, I've had a couple, I go, are you Christian? And if you are, can you be professional? Because if I hear any religious stuff come out of your mouth, I leave. I'm not looking for a spiritual guide. I'm not looking for religious. I'm looking for science-minded therapy. And so I insist on that. And I've had a person say, I am religious, but I am a professional. I do science-based stuff. And I'm like, great, we can do this. If you're a professional, I am. And so I don't mind a person's religious background. I mind if they're professional, they're going to push it down my throat. And so, you know, I took the challenge, and I've almost been seeing Steven a year. It's 10 months now, 10, 11 months. Mm-hmm. And we have a great relationship. I trust him to do the EMDR, which is a hard thing to trust, where you're like, you're going to fuck with my mind? You're going to fuck with my mind and implant thoughts? Like, this is crazy. You know, that's a really heavy thing. But I have to say, it feels like it might be working. And I'm so skeptical of it. But I've done like 3 or 4 sessions, and my triggers are getting less. So.
And, okay, so I actually would like to come back to EMDR and ask you some questions about it. So these two rods you hold that are vibrating, is the vibration caused by the machine, or are you causing it somehow?
The machine, it's like a little box. Yes.
Okay.
There's a box
So it's generating the sensory stuff, and you are instructed to think about something regarding the trauma you guys are focusing on.
Well, I have to think about the paddles and the beeps, which isn't hard because they're vibrating and beeping. So I have to think about the mantra and the trauma all at once.
Okay.
And
That's
so
a
I
lot.
put myself in this traumatic space, and it's like hard to do all this. And, then Steven's like, I can control, he's saying it softly where I can hear it. And that's how that works.
And it's supposed to allow you to go to those places that you don't want to go to and just face it.
Yes, I guess where you heal traumas are in your REM sleep. And so if you have a trauma, someone hurt you.
Oh, I get it.
So someone hurt you, and and you don't get any sleep that night because someone smacked you or robbed you. And you're like, and you don't get any sleep that night, and you don't get your healing. And then you drive by the corner where you were robbed and you trigger out. That's because you didn't get that REM sleep or whatever. So it's like, you get it. I don't really get it, but he's insisting but through this whole year, he's insisted, Shane, you've got to get 8 hours of sleep. You've got to do this. You've got to do this. He doesn't say got to. That's not a word in the nonviolent communications. It's suggestive. Like, this is how human beings. Yeah, this is how human beings work. This is the science of it. We need sleep. It's very important.
My guess as a non-scientific person is that the REM pattern, so when you go to sleep, your dreams are your brain filing things in your mind. And so allowing this therapy allows the expedition of getting this shit in the files, into the classified files, and back into the cabinet, and not keep poking out and being annoying, is what it sounds.
That sounds good.
Kind of like someone helping I don't mean to compare you to one, but it sounds like a therapist's version of those specialists who come in to organize a hoarder's closet or something like that. There's these things you cannot let go. You can't do it. So this is the assistance.
Oh, certainly therapy is just like that. I think cleaning up your mind. Yes.
We did an episode a while back that was part of our new series called Movie Magic Circle regarding Dr. Sleep, which is the Shining sequel. And this, I can't help but think of the boxes locked up in Danny's head of all the ghosts in the past in the snow. And you're sort of locking up these boxes.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one. I hope I'm locking them up for certain. It's been a really hard go.
I'll tell you, I've only known you since you've been receiving therapy, or maybe a little before. How long have you been seeking counseling?
Oh, about 5 years. I started about 5 years ago. And if you want to know how, I was really, there's a lot of stuff that I've had to unpack. I don't think we have all the time in the world. This is hard to say. Like my mother, I was severely picked on, abused by my parents.
Okay.
And so basically, and we're going to talk about my relationship in another episode. So I don't want to get too much into that here. But let's just say I was turning a blind eye to things. And a lot of times when I saw something, I was scared out of it, yelled at, stuff like that. And so I started to get really hostile. And I saw someone at a grocery store, and he looked at me and he sort of smiled, and I was like going to go after him and pound the shit out of him for no reason. And I was like, holy fuck, I've got to go get help or I'm going to end up beaten or in jail. I was really going to handle that person for no good reason. I'm like fucking freaking out. I'm so upset. And so that's when I started to go to therapy, and I started taking anxiety meds, and I was diagnosed with CPTSD. Yeah, PTSD. Yeah, C, which is supposed to be extreme. And so
I've never heard that initial above the PTSD.
It's complex PTSD, I guess.
Oh, okay. And so you started seeking therapy on your own.
Yes.
No one told you to.
Well, I knew the outcome of what was going to happen. I didn't want to go to prison, and I didn't want to have the shit kicked out of me. I'm going to get in a fight with someone I can't fight. You know, like I was not in my right mind. So I ran to a doctor before it got worse. Yeah.
Before we go forward on this part, I wanted to continue my thought that I have only known you as someone seeking therapy. I didn't know you before this. So listeners, also, you should know that I haven't known Shane long enough to know what he was like before seeking counseling. And when we became friends, he was already seen Dr. Steven, I believe. And then along the way, he started... You weren't.
No, I was seeing Steven when I moved to Chicago, and we were talking while I was still in Oregon.
Got it. You were almost out of Oregon when we started talking. But,
right, but I was seeing another therapist when I was in Oregon.
Okay, so. Got it. But so based on what I've seen, I feel like your sensitivity toward things, or how you address yourself and take care of yourself, has become far more diligent than it was when we first met, to be honest. You're so on it about, like, I gotta get to bed. And I'm usually those people who say, I gotta get to bed to my friends, and then I stay on the phone for hours. And it's interesting to hear someone else doing it and being far more diligent than I am. And I'm the one keeping people up.
Oh, no. Last night you even said, go to sleep, get in bed, go to sleep. You made me go to bed. I was
and then I'm like, look at my socks.
But I would have kept talking to you all night. You insisted I go to bed, and that was that was cool and a decent friend thing to do. Well, I'll tell you, when I came back to town, I've been hanging out with people I haven't seen in 25 years. And they've all said I've changed a lot. And one of my friends went through something very similar to what I'm going through, which again, we'll talk about on another show. I don't want to yammer on, but it's almost a clinical thing. And so boy, now I'm having a trauma, almost forgetting what I was going to say. That's great. Right. This is memory loss is part of that. But she said, you're doing very well. It took me 4 years to get where I'm at. And her sister was like, oh, it took me 3 years. You're doing great. And I'm like, well, I go to therapy twice a week. You know, that's all I've been doing for this year is working on my health. So, I've been, privileged in that respect. And so I'm just lucky that I have access to this solution. The modern day occultist is the psychiatrist and the therapist. They're the ones who study the mind, and you can't really play poker with the psychiatrist. Like my psychiatrist, I would not want to play poker with. She can see when you're that eye. I got you. You're lying. She'll know. She can read she's worse than a mobster or a hooker or a beautician. Those are all three people that can read you like a motherfucker, like boom. And it's like, she's better. She's like all three rolled up into one. So there's like no point in lying to her. No, don't even try it.
When you decided to seek help 5 years ago, we're going to get into a lot of this in other episodes, so we're just going to graze upon this. But did you have a stressful life? Like when you felt angry at that guy?
Yes. Yeah. I had, like I said, I turned a blind eye to a lot of stuff. So the anger was placed in other places, like politically or other frustrations that just weren't really there. It was a frustration that I realized what was happening, but I chose to put it in my, I couldn't deal with it.
Your blind eye was in regard, when you were talking about a blind eye earlier, I wasn't quite sure if you were talking about Linda or if you were speaking about your life at the time. So that clarifies it very, very well.
Oh, well, Linda has a lot to do with it because you married your mother and all this stuff. So it's like that stuff all came to fruit. And for the last 10 years, when I lost everything in Ely after that shunning, that was a start of my decline as having traumas and stuff like that. That was the start of me getting to be a bitter person and very angry. Like when you hear me on that 24-hour radio show that we've talked about on a first season or something like that.
Yes.
You know, I had issues back then, but I was dealing with them like as a heathen or whatever, drinking and having fun and not really giving a fuck about hurting people's feelings or, you know, espousing, let the world burn. So at some point that is a therapeutic thing. You know, you're not dealing with your problems, you know, and when I got run out of Ely, that was gone. I couldn't do that anymore. So my problem started to deal with me. So
it's hard to laugh now, cry later when it threatens your life, when it's something that's frightening, that threatening that you spoke of in our Ely episode. By the way, if you don't know what we're talking about, go back to season 1, and we have a 2-part episode regarding Shane's time as a business owner in Ely, Minnesota, why he was there, and why it was so terrible. It's quite a grisly story, and it's absolutely vital to a lot of what we're talking about right now. So go back, check.
Even in Problem Child, when you spoke about, like, you compared Problem Child, the movie, Magic Movie Circle, number 3, I think it is.
Yes.
When he was just being himself and getting in trouble for things. That was basically my life as a child and even as an adult. Like, I was doing things, and Ely wasn't the first town I was run out of. I've had trouble in Chicago. I had trouble in Indiana. I had trouble in Minnesota. It was like, I don't know what I'm doing wrong here. Like, I'm just being myself. I'm not doing anything illegal. But what I did and the philosophical viewpoints were not popular, or they were definitely against the authority figures. So authority wants to push back, I guess. You know, I still don't necessarily get why I'm run out of towns, but here I am.
I think also a lot of your endeavors were very ahead of their time, and a lot of it may not have happened in 2019.
Oh, absolutely. I'm totally with you on that. Believe that. I feel, you know, a handful of friends over the years have called me the canary in the coal mine.
Yes, definitely.
And so that's a rough thing to see, where you lose everything and have mental and physical scars from it. And then 20 years later, people are making tons of money off it. And it's like, can you guys give me a job? You know,
being the canary in the coal mine is rough. And it's something I can sympathize with as well. That is a different level of trauma that you have to deal with as an artist, as a creator, as an occultist. And I think that as canaries in the coal mine, others who come along to what you've been doing for 10 plus years do not understand that trauma. They act like you aren't up to snuff, even though you've been up to snuff longer. You are getting too old for this shit sometimes.
That's exactly it. Like, I had some shit shaved off of me in Ely. Like, it did a number on me where my thinking declined. You know, I was very, very sharp and courageous before that. And when that happened, I had a twitch. I started to become jaded or something. I started to have a fear almost, like, or a paranoia, a righteous paranoia. And my naivete started to disappear, you know, and then I understood, well, I shouldn't be doing these things. I shouldn't start a soda company because I'm not from that class of person. I'm going to get punished for this. I shouldn't be doing that. I should be cleaning dishes or being a plumber, because anything else will get me in trouble. And that's consistently what's happened. Anytime I step out of the class that I was born into, I get in trouble. And I see other people with money and privilege being able to do the same shit I'm doing without trouble, or they have the resources to fight it off. So they don't, you know, they don't get in trouble. I don't know how that really works, but it's not easy to see it. It's been hard not to give up, you know, but also at the same time, like, when you talk about when this started, like 10 years ago or so, that's when I started to give up on things. When I first ended up in Washington, Oregon area, you know, I was like, my whole identity was stripped. I lost everything. And I was like, I'm just going to walk into the sea. I've got nothing left, you know, and I've never thought that way before. I've never been that kind of person. I've always been a go-getter, but I was definitely starting to quit at life, you know. becomes hard to push through, when, so misunderstood. To be so misunderstood is hard to push through, and then, go try to make a friend and they look at your name on the internet and it's hard to explain to them. So it's hard to make friends, all that.
That's very sympathetic. I felt that way when I left LA and moved to the Bay Area. The feeling of starting over when you're ready to give up is really tough. It's another layer of trauma, and it's as artists, it's a manner of trauma that, no offense, listeners, if you're not an artist, regular jackoffs don't understand.
Oh, truly, they don't.
Act like, well, just get a regular job. Just it's over. And they don't understand the strings attached to your life, that it's not as easy as cutting them off, because when you cut them off, you start bleeding because they are arteries in your body, not fucking strings.
Yeah, it's who we are. It's not a gig. They can't relate, and it's really that makes it even harder. I'm very lucky to have your friendship, and the few artists that I talk to are people that I can talk to, whether they have a similar belief system or not in me. But artists are a breed all of their own. They're born, not created, as the saying goes. And yeah, it would kill me if I couldn't do what I do. Really, I think it would kill me. So I'm, fuck, it's nuts. And I've heard people, my last partner included, talking, and, she left our creative partnership and all, and talking to some neighbors and go, well, I just create art for fun. I don't have to create it. And I was like, oh,
some privilege.
Yeah. And I'm like, oh my God, I have to create it. This is the only way I'm seen in life. Like the only way I can communicate, like words escape me a lot of times. Like I was just at a coffee shop and I could barely communicate handing someone a note, but the note is where I communicated. The art is where I can communicate this. Like for me, I can bring you a sculpture and give this to you. I don't know if I can tell you what I can't do much more than that, but that's what I do. And I've always done that. I went to prison for when I was 17, charged as an adult, 16, just turned 17. And the public defender got me off, and I brought her a ceramic pot that I made. And I met her like 15 years later, and she still had it, and she showed it to me.
Oh, that must feel nice to see it too.
Yeah, she said it was such the biggest deal to her, and she kept track of my record. Every year she'd look me up to make sure I wasn't in trouble, because if I got in trouble, she would have wrote to people and said, throw the book at him. We gave him a chance. And so I was like, she's like, so, the judge was in that, like, that was her deal with the judge. Like, you got to keep up on this kid. And if he fucks up, he gets the time he was supposed to get now. And so I've never fucked up. I took that chance. Was like, thank you. I'll take this opportunity and watch who I hang out with from now on. You become who you surround yourself with.
The company you keep.
Right. That's right. The company you keep, like the show. Yes, exactly.
Were you, when you sought therapy back in Oregon, how did it change your life initially? Did you feel yourself becoming a different person?
Well, yeah, because I'm also like self-taught in so many ways. And so when the therapist told me about boundaries, and I said, explain this, and I challenged my therapist philosophically, I challenge them in a way they're not challenged usually. And so they love it. Like, this is, we don't get this much. Let's have this conversation. It's exciting for them. And I challenge them intellectually. But when I found out what boundaries were, well, it made me a better person. But therapy strengthens relationships or destroys them. And it pretty much destroyed mine, because I was able to have boundaries and say, you can't treat me that way. I've asked you not to talk to me that way. And if I can't talk to you that way, you most certainly can't talk to me that way. And I was able to say that without fear. And at one point, which my psychiatrist says, oh, well, that was it. And I go, why was that it? And she goes, when I say this, there's part of me that says punch a hole in this fucking, and I'm sorry to say these things, but punch a hole in the wall, smash things, smash a person's head, like that, grab someone by the neck, like that's gouge an eye, like that's what my response is still in my head. Like that's something I was taught as a young man, as a child, as a baby from my father. So that's a gift that keeps on giving at times. And so that therapy, help me deal with it in a way where I'm able to say, I'm not afraid of you, not I'm going to yell so loud to scare you. I was able to say, stop right there. I'm allowed to have friends. You can't, don't accuse me of things like that. That's inappropriate. I was able to say these things, and there's no arguing with that stuff. When you have a boundary, you can't argue it. It's, it's like someone says, don't touch me, and you touch them, get ready for action. Like, the boundaries are there. And when you learn what boundaries are, that was a big thing for me. And I also read Nonviolent Communication by Rosenberg. And a lot of that I don't agree with, but a lot of it I did. And it's basically like almost a satanic Bible. This guy's like, basically, get what you want without shitting on people. That's basically what he talks about the whole time. How can you get your needs met without hurting other people? And I was like, oh, right on. This is like might is right, but for the mind. Like, it's not like bully people to get what you want. It's like, no, listen to them, get them to hear what you want, and communicate until you get your needs met without shitting on people. And I was like, oh, that's the way I want to go. I don't want to be anything like my father or any of these people around me. I don't like sports. I don't like that whole mentality. I'm more of an intellectual, and that was for me. So that helped me out a lot. That book and my guides, like it's all been, and I got to say, it's all been women that have helped me out in my life. Like it's all women that have lifted me up and kept me on this track. And so, a great friend of mine turned me onto that book, and she's a savior to me, one of my guides. And it's just, I was lucky. I'm lucky.
Was your therapist in Oregon female?
Yes.
Okay. And then,
Julie, she was great. She was fucking great. And she looked right out of like Portlandia. She had the black hair, the glasses, stuff just like it. It was fucking hilarious. But she's so smart. She was on it, and she just did not. She did. Well, she was great. She was great, and she told me a lot of things that were happening in my life in a way that she didn't tell me. But she's like, that's not appropriate. Do you know that? And I'm like, no. This is what I'm used to. This is what I grew up with. And she goes, no, that is not appropriate. And so she was able to tell me things that I just had no clue because it was just normal to me. It's like how I was raised. So I got into something that I was very familiar with. It was something like that.
Your statement of, I'm not afraid of you anymore, was it something that you knew you felt all along about this person, or did you realize that you needed to confront this? Like, did you feel afraid of this person, admittedly?
Yeah, that's how I was able to be manipulated and controlled. And I hate saying this stuff because it's like you can't control me, bitch. And I'm talking from the toxic standpoint. Like that's how it goes. But part of being an artist is ugly truths. And if I can't present this ugly truth, my art stagnates. And so that's why I have to push this out. And I feel like it's going to strip me of my identity again as a man. And I understand that's not true, but it's really hard to communicate this, to say these things,
Yes.
Admitting childhood abuse and then admitting you lived most of your life in an awful way while you're projecting this strength and projecting all this other shit out into the world. It was all a lie. And so, yeah, I was afraid. And at that time, it just came to my mind, like, I'm not afraid of you anymore. I wasn't. I was there were buttons trying to be pushed. And at that point, I've been in therapy for 3 years. And when I study something, when I get into something, I study it. So when the therapist gave me a book, I read it and I'd read 3 more. So I really studied my problems to understand what was going on. And because I want to argue with people, I want to argue with the therapist and go, I read that book and you're wrong. And I read this and you're wrong. And there's another book I read that was really devastating. It was like The Body Keeps the Score, I think it's called. Body Keeps the Score. And that's heavy. That's fucking like another woman suggested I read that. And she said it took me 5 years to read it, to get through it. And it broke me down. Another woman said it took her a week. She went to a cabin and it just broke her down. It was devastating. It devastated her and it devastated me. And it made me understand a lot about my situation on both ends. It made me understand a lot and was like, oh my God, it's a game changer. That book is a game changer. Beware reading it though. It definitely a game changer. It definitely will kick your ass. It's the hardest book I've ever read.
We're going to have a small list in our info section of these books, their titles and authors, because they are fixtures. It looks like when you look up these books, they are fixtures in PTSD therapy and etc. And it doesn't hurt to read. Even if you don't agree with what we're discussing, what harm is it to read it?
If you're suffering, you don't even realize you're suffering, but if you're in a dysfunctional relationship or dysfunctional life, that Body Keeps the Score, I think that's the name of it, would definitely help clue you in as to why that's happening. And, with answers come solutions. And that's how it worked for me. Like when I was given answers, I was able to go, oh, okay. Oh, wow, that's gross. Oh, I'm reliving, like you create problems and you don't even realize. I'm not saying you do, but I did, because that's what I was used to or something. It's just I'm not going to try to explain it, but I'm going to say if you have issues and you want to feel life away from pain, those books are good, even though they're painful to get through. It's like a workout, like your muscles are hurt, but you get healthy. And so it's like, I'm looking to experience whatever life I have left at this age with less of the torment and the anxiety and if you're in trauma, you know what it is. It's awful. It's an awful feeling you get used to. And as I'm getting away from it, I'm like, wow, this is how life is supposed to be. This is how it is. And so I'm like, I haven't even lived a life. I'm 50 years old and I haven't lived a life. This is how I felt when I was a child. Like that's the only time I can remember feeling like this is like when I was very young. And so it's really, I think about how many people have that same issue, and then when I read the Me Too movement, and I know we're going to talk about that and others, it's like, like every single woman on the fucking face of the earth feels this way. And then, it's like what an awful society or something went wrong because we shouldn't feel this way.
After you admitted you were not afraid of this person anymore, did the walls kind of, like, I'm imagining a movie where, like, the walls peel apart or something happens because you broke a mold. It definitely wasn't a positive reaction, was it?
Well, no, and I know we're going to talk about this in an episode, so I don't want to talk too much about it, I guess.
I would just like to just tease.
It was not. It was
okay.
That with rage. Here's a funny one. One of my buddies in this band Surfboard, and they're popular. They're a popular band. And he's gone through a lot of shit, drugs and problems, and we're friends from a long time ago. So I met with him to talk about some of my problems, and I was telling him one situation back when I was still in Oregon, like when I was first seeking counseling, and I'm like, I'm starting to feel really better. I'm starting to feel better about this stuff. Why don't you join me? I'm feeling better. And the response was, isn't that nice? And I was like, there's something wrong with this whole picture. So you could say the walls started peeling, and they were peeling for years. After that moment, I was like, I'm in a hostile environment, I guess. Because, you think when you're like, I'm feeling better, someone's going to go, hey, congratulations. What pill are you taking? I want that. And I was like, isn't that nice? And I was like, holy shit. So it was very much, that's the moment I think back, and my buddy from Surfboard laughed his head off. He's like, oh my God, that is so funny. He hated to laugh, but he's like, that is just like belongs in a movie. And I agree with him. It is sort of funny when, I'm far away from that moment. I'm 5 years away from it, so I can laugh at it. But it was like, man, this is crazy. Like, what? So, it was a very long, drawn out, painful process. It wasn't like I said this and the walls came tumbling down in 6 months.
But you definitely saw a glitch in the matrix after that, because your eyes were opened a little differently.
Yeah. When I'm going to, therapists are like, that's not normal, or this is how you might want to deal with that, or you feel guilty, but that someone else shares that guilt. And, they start helping you unpack things that are in your head. And, for me, and this is probably not part of those shows, but for me, I guess maybe it is. I have to think about what I unpack here. Yeah, I guess we'll leave that for that show, what I was about to say, because that does lead into a big conversation.
Sure.
That's a teaser. How do you like that?
Yeah. It's interesting that others reacted unfavorably with, isn't that nice? And other things, as you're starting to ask more questions in the world, because you are, being assessed under a magnifying glass by someone else who is sort of grading your homework and telling you, hey, this isn't right, but it can be it can be, made right, things like that. It's sort of like being satanic, being an occultist, the idea of questioning everything, seeking that extra knowledge. And as many people on the left-hand path know, that when you seek that knowledge, oftentimes you are faced with peers who may not like that, because you're going against the grain. And it's interesting that it happened to you on a different level.
Yeah, and it's hard for me to even think about this stuff now. I'm sort of losing my train of thought. It was definitely a trip, and it's dark, way darker than what I just said. So that was just the tip of the iceberg. I would hope that you could bring this conversation up when we talk about in the future shows that we have planned.
Yes, of course.
Because this moment we can unpack again, and I can tell you how the depths of darkness that happened, and it's quite incredible. And that explains why I've been in serious therapy for the last year. That would be help explain things. But I could tell you this, I've never been diagnosed as being crazy or schizophrenic or psychotic, as I've been accused in some of the slurs that have gone around after I left. I've only been diagnosed as someone who's had PTSD and has recently slipped into a depression, which my psychiatrist says a lot of people will come out of that a year or two after like a year after medication. She's been medicating me. So in another like 8 months, 6 months, she'll check up and we'll see how it goes, wean me off things and see how it goes. So because I'm worried, I'm like, how can I don't want to take these pills for the rest of my life. How can I work this out? So I changed my diet. I'm trying to go to the gym often. That's something that doesn't happen as regular as I'd like, but I do go to the gym. I do eat a lot better. I watch taking in sugars and stuff like that. So it's like, I don't want to take pills. So what can I get rid of so I can get rid of these pills? And that's what I'm working on now.
Good for you. Good for you. Might I ask, does your therapist or your psychiatrist listen to this podcast?
Well, I don't think my therapist does, but my psychiatrist, when I went in and when I first met with her, she's like, come back next week. And I came back and she's like, okay, I've run you on she ran me on the internet. Because at first my story, you sit down and go, hi, well, I'm a Satanist. And I did that, and I hung out with Anton LaVey, and I start railing my story, and most people look at me like, you fucking liar. Like, there's no fucking way this is true.
Mm-hmm.
And so, that's how she looked at me. Like, I'm like, yeah, I know about Gacy. I did a book with Gacy. She's, she asked about serial killers. I'm like, I did a book with Gacy. She's like, mm-hmm. But then she looked me up, and she Googled me and read all about me, and she knew about me when I came back in, and she's a studied person. So, like, I'll tell her something, and she goes, you don't say that. And I go, she goes, it sounds flaky, right? And I go, but it's true. And she goes, I believe you. But if you say it to someone else, they're going to think you're crazy, right? And I go, yes. Because some of the things that have gone on in my life are just like for a regular person at a coffee shop, like, yeah, I hung out with the guy who invented the Church of Satan. Yeah. Right. Like you're not, they step 5 feet away from me, So I put out obscene books. Okay, let's get away from that. One of them was called The Rape Issue. Let's get away from this guy. So it's like everyone would think I'm crazy based on this reality. So I get what she's saying. Like, just think about it being 1,000 times more crazy sounding than my actual life
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
is. Like, that's what my situation is right now, or that I left. It was that dark and insane. It's like fucking can be a movie.
It almost seems like if you tell someone what you're about, it's a great way to promote our podcast too, because people love podcasts. They love podcasts about anything, even outside of their comfort level. And they love to know everything about everything after hearing a podcast. And it's what an icebreaker to have. Hey, I got a podcast where this bossy person grills me all the time and finds out more about me. Come crack this nut with her.
Yeah, I would like that, but it's sometimes it gets lonely on this end of things. It's like I want to make a friend, and when they run my name on the internet, they don't want to be my friend. They're my friends until they do that. And you meet a young lady or a mature woman, whatever you want to say. Like, everyone's young to me at this point, and they want to look into you. They get scared, and rightfully so. I get it. This is scary stuff, and it's meant to be. And so my options are very thin down, and so, but I also have made a decision that I'm not going back to a dysfunctional life. I only thought, like, when I was I'll tell you this part, this is maybe something that ties into one of those other shows, but unpacked it recently at the psychiatrist's office, that it's like I got with all the people I got with and most of the girlfriends and stuff, because I didn't think I deserved more. And I remember this young lady, Julie, she was like college educated and smart and really cool. And then I picked someone else because they were like a dirtbag. They were like a drunk, drug addict, stripper, a prostitute, whatever. And I'm not putting any of that down. Not at all. I'm just saying, like, that's where I was like, okay, I just rather go over here. This is my person. This is my mother. This is my family. This is what I'm used to. I'm afraid of you because you're educated. And I've never had that in my life. And you seem well adjusted. And that scares the shit out of me. And, present day, that's all I want in my life is people who are well adjusted and trying to be healthy. And I don't know if I'll ever find that, because a lot of the crowd that I've dealt with and given my life to is not well adjusted. Most Satanists or most metalheads or the people I've dealt with are lower end, and they have a lot of pain and problems. And so, and I'm not putting them down, but, I've like, I gave up dealing with serial killers. Like, I studied that to a point where I don't need to study it anymore. I understand. And I don't want to hang out with people who aren't well adjusted anymore. It's just enough, and I'm not putting you down. I hang out with you, but I'm not going to stay too long. I'll have a drink with you and leave, but I can't do it anymore.
I think you're doing a really good service toward a lot of former peers and perhaps people who have been interested in you for a long time by doing this episode. You definitely walked us through what your process has been, even though it's been, only an hour-long episode. I think that you've shed a lot of light on things people have no idea about besides television, who still refuse to seek help, who may not think they need help, but you did it, and just like the other times you've been the canary in the cage, it'll make it easy for someone else. And I do encourage anyone listening to this who's thought twice about seeking help, that there are resources out there for you, and you're not alone.
Yeah, I can attest. It's a lot easier to punch a hole in the wall. It's a lot easier to, smoke a bong or drink yourself into a stupor. It's easy shit. And when you talk about man up, which I don't agree with that phrase, but if you're stuck in that world, this was the hardest thing I've ever done. Because you're laying yourself naked and you're being vulnerable. But I can tell you also, like, really decent folks, and I mean decent in a cunning, smart, cool way. People that are cool, they respect people who are vulnerable. Cool artists, high-end, like people that you watch on TV, the artists that you idolize. Those people really have been vulnerable. Marilyn Manson has been vulnerable to a point that he's given himself away to everyone. And so he puts on an image of this dark person, but the reason he's where he's at is because he was able to be vulnerable. And if you want to climb the ladder and you're stuck at a lower rung, therapy is going to help you out if you can learn how to be vulnerable. And that's a hard thing, especially when you're a toxic dude, and I can't speak for women, but they've got a whole different hard deal to deal with than men do. They have a whole. But we're going to talk about that in the Me Too episode.
Dudes who like Might Is Right, you like those hard pills to swallow, you should read The Body Keeps the Score and other forms of these. These are definitely nice magic books to keep on your shelf right next to Might Is Right, because you get one side of it, but you get another hard truth in these. And if you felt like that made you feel empowered, maybe pair this up with something else. Variety is the key.
Yeah, and as the person who popularized in modern time and published Might Is Right, I can tell you absolutely Body Keeps the Score is the hardest book I've ever read. And from the 90s, when before the internet, I'm the hardest of hardcore publishers. I put out the hardest stuff. And that book is crippling. But it's freeing at the same time. It's like breaking out of like an ice, like you're trapped under ice. Metallica, trapped under ice. And you break out. You're like break out of the ice, and you live, and you see a life that you only saw on TV. You only experienced in the entertainment business, and you thought was bullshit. But it's not. Happiness is for everyone.
Thank you for listening. Please subscribe and tune into our next episode wherever you prefer to listen to podcasts. You can find us at Speak of the Devil Pod on Twitter and contact us at speakofthedevilpod@gmail.com. For Shane's artwork or to support his endeavors, please visit shanebugby.com or find him on Twitter at ShaneBugby. I've been Nannerl. Have a good one.
Oh, and shaneisthedevil.com.